Good evening and welcome to the Fourth Estate. My name is Charles Mwangushampagi, and tonight we'll be focusing on only one component of President Yoweri Museveni's State of the Nation address, which he delivered on Tuesday. And we'll be trying to interrogate the question of industrialization. President Museveni has been singing about industrialization and transformation of the country. The question we'll be trying to answer tonight is his new pledge to move towards industrialization realistic? What has been standing in the way? And the bottlenecks he highlighted, are they bottlenecks that could have been dealt with? But we're starting this show on a weekend that's been full of very, very significant news. One is, of course, the passing of boxing legend Muhammad Ali, the American, who actually many people never knew why he became the greatest. It wasn't just his antics inside the ring, but more of what his conscience told him and how he dealt with the politics of the time in the United States of America around in the 1960s and 1970s. We also have, this is also the weekend when the Uganda Cranes beat Botswana 2-1. So for Uganda Cranes fans and all Ugandans, congratulations to the Uganda Cranes. In studio, let me introduce the panel that I have to discuss. Let me start with Ona Pito Ekomoloit. Ona, always a pleasure to be with you here.
Thank you, Charles. I was actually in Botswana, though I did not watch the Cranes when I left shortly.
You are unpatriotic. You should have been there to cheer on the Uganda Cranes. Ona Pito, for purposes of this discussion, has been a journalist. He has worked with the president very closely, and he now works with a multinational company called SAB Miller, or Nile Breweries in Uganda. Nile Brewery is just a component. And this is supposed to be, I think, the second largest beer producer in the world, is it?
Yes.
Yes, the second largest beer producer in the world. You're also into production of water now. You produce water. Yeah, you acquired the other unit for Rwenzori. So you can tell us a few things about industrialization since you're hanging around some of those people, some of the manufacturers. Let me also introduce Grace Achiro. Grace, in inviting you to the show and preparing to have you here, one is you share a name with another very famous Achiro, Rita. So people are saying, Rita, I know that's an NGO person. But very nice to have you. Grace is the Chief Executive Officer of Vantage Communication. She's a member of the Board of Directors of Uganda Women Entrepreneurs, and she previously worked with the Uganda Investment Authority and the Private Sector Foundation. Very nice to have you. So that's
Thank you, Charles.
Some very rich experience in industrialization, why we're not industrializing as a country. And of course, my colleague, Daily Monitor journalist, law student, Ivan Okuda. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles. Much obliged and most humbled. Good evening, Uganda.
Let me start with you, Ona Pito. You've listened to the president speak about industrialization for many years. I was doing some reflection and I found that he started from the time he came into power. But he made a major speech, I think it was in Rio, where he said we are exporting at least 6 jobs by exporting one product, coffee. And we're exporting, and we are donating, I don't remember the amount of money he put, how much we're donating to Nestle by exporting raw coffee. He repeated that speech, I think, at the World Trade Organization meeting somewhere, I think in Japan or China. He's been repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. Did he say anything new on Tuesday when he talked about industrialization?
Well, Charles, I think the president is absolutely spot on in terms of analyzing Uganda's problem. In fact, right from the time he came to power, that NRM wanted to build an integrated and self-sustaining economy. There's no doubt about the wisdom of his diagnosis. But I guess this is an African challenge that since independence, the problem of Africa has been identified as relying on primary products and exporting them unprocessed and importing finished goods more expensively. And since the international market for our raw materials collapsed for many decades now, we are really now in a serious disadvantage whereby we don't even export enough of unprocessed products, and yet we have to keep on importing. I think since I joined the private sector, I can see where the crisis is. Primarily, the biggest challenge in answering the president's sort of analysis, why hasn't it worked maybe adequately for the last 30 years? I think the basic problem is not, first of all, appreciating market locally. That's the biggest challenge. Because you cannot get Ugandans to consume what is produced in Uganda if you don't understand why they are not doing it. You must first of all analyze what is the per capita consumption of a particular product. And is it low because people want other quality which is not available in Uganda, or they simply can't afford? Because if it's that they can't afford, then you have to address the question of affordability. If it's that they prefer better quality, then you need to address the question of quality. So right now, I think government has not clearly tackled that issue, that are Ugandans not buying Ugandan because they prefer foreign, or because they can't afford, or because they can't afford Ugandan-made products. So I think that's the basic analysis, because if that is done, if the question of inability to afford, then you must make product which is affordable. If it is a question of preferring foreign because the Ugandan is considered inferior, then you need to go to an innovation to make the Ugandan one competitive with the imported one.
That for Uganda to join the manufacturing class,
yes,
Ugandans must do two things. One is that we must be able to accept low-value products, which we must accept to buy expensively to encourage local. There isn't a country in the world that has developed into an industrialized world, an industrialized country, without first protecting its fledgling industry. I mean industries which often are producing poor quality products, but out of that production of poor quality products, they are able to improve in quality.
Look,
and they must produce them expensively because the cost of production will be high.
Forget about producing poor quality products. You must produce products which match foreign quality. I mean, it's all about branding, but the core satisfaction must be there. You may not, if it's cloth, you may not have to produce a brand which is the same as the one which is imported.
So you become a
but
supermarket
people must
of
be
the world.
able to derive the same satisfaction from the local clothes.
Okay, let me turn to Grace. Grace, you work with all these women entrepreneurs, and you've been around various efforts to encourage made in Uganda. From your perspective, what is the bottleneck? The president outlines his bottlenecks, which he has been outlining like for zillion years. What do you see practically as the major bottleneck?
First of all, I would like to probably agree also with the Komoloit. One of the key things, of course, I think even if we want to think about industrialization, the first thing is that do we have the capacity to buy the products? Uganda has a population that lives, I think about over 80% of the population lives below, use about $2 a day. And you're producing something that is going to cost you more than $2 a day. That is basically that person's daily income. Now, until we begin to start looking at the income capacity of Ugandans, we will probably sing the song of producing and selling to Ugandans, but they cannot afford to buy it. But even then, there are products that can be affordable to Ugandans. But some of the things that as we work with our women and the women who are trying to produce goods and they are trying to also access the commercial market, like the supermarkets and stuff like that, there are key things that keeps coming up. First of all, the products that are produced cannot meet the requirement of those supermarkets, and they cannot compete with those international products. They come in cheap.
Why is there that problem? Because let's first go back to the question of affordability.
Yeah.
Go stand at any supermarket.
Yeah.
At any of these sprawling shopping malls that are emerging in Kampala and in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Whether you are in Nigeria, where Quality Shoppers has a huge mall, a huge supermarket, or you are in Lubowa, or you are in Entebbe, or you are down here at Oasis Mall or Garden City, or you are in Bugolobi, or you're on these the smaller what they call supermarkets, not mega stores. These are moving towards mega stores. You see Ugandans wheeling out carts that are full of products. Possibly someone walks in one evening in 30 minutes and they wheel out products worth 300,000 Uganda shillings.
But
So affordability.
How many are they? How many of such people are there?
When
you look at the population,
no,
if you look at the population, you'll find that makes less than 1%.
Yes,
of the
but the
population.
difference I see, I look at the stalls of Nakumat, for example,
Yeah.
and they are full of American Garden ketchup, American Garden chili sauce, American Garden beans, American Garden this, and I don't see Reco, for example, on the same, or where the Reco is. One, the display is poor. Two, Ugandans are not picking it off the shelf. Is that a problem?
Yeah, there is a problem too. Of course, the other issue is a mindset kind of thing. We think Ugandan products are of lower quality. That's kind of a mindset that needs to be changed. And really, when you open up these products, you'll probably find that some of these Ugandan products are even much more better quality than the ones that are coming up from outside. But that is something that needs to be changed. We need to begin to appreciate that the things that are produced in Uganda are not of low quality. But then how do we do that? I think the way to go about doing it is to make sure that we have our products standardized. Most of the products that are produced in Uganda don't have what we call the quality marks and the standard marks. So without that, you cannot even get yourself on the supermarket shelf.
But just before Ivan comes, I don't want you to worry about the purchasing patterns in the supermarkets. I want you to go back to my argument about per capita consumption of those items amongst overall Ugandans. Yeah. And you'll find that a bulk of the population is not participating in that consumption. No, so now, if you want to produce Ugandan, don't produce to target these ones who are already hooked. Produce to get the other group which is not consuming the product. No, that means the other group is largely unable to afford.
I find that quite a huge contradiction.
It's not a contradiction.
Let me bring it to Ivan Okuda. Ivan, Warren Buffett is one of the richest guys in the United States, in the world actually. I think he keeps oscillating between third and second for a long time, and from the time he was overthrown by Bill Gates. He bought into a South American food chain. His products are coming into Uganda. Ugandans are consuming them. And we are singing the song of industrialization, transformation. And we listen to the president. Is it lack of capacity? Is it lack of appreciation of quality? Or is there some other problem?
I think, Charles, you'll have to bear with my obsession with the issue of governance. Before I came here, I had a mutual friend of ours, Andrew Mwenda, hosted me and a group of other quite awesome people at his home. And coincidentally, this was part of the crux of our conversation. And he shared a very touching story. What ordinarily would be a success story for Uganda, the story of Andrew Gasira and Good African Coffee. And the struggles that Andrew went through to essentially get his product on the global market. It's extremely difficult for a Ugandan producer to get the products on the American market, or even the British market, or even the European market. Andrew managed to do it. To get his coffee on the market stalls of some of the most competitive supermarkets
in South Africa and the United Kingdom.
Yes, absolutely. And these guys control about 80% of the market shareholding in terms of customers. When Andrew does that, demand for the product, of course with the book and the interviews that he got across the world after that very good book that he did, the demand for his product went up, but the supply could not be sustained. Yeah. Reason? You get beans from Uganda, take them to India where they're processed and packaged, and take to the global market. But the supermarkets cannot afford to keep their stalls empty because you fail to supply. So Andrew approaches the president of the republic and, among other people, the finance minister, there's Chris Kasami, then PST.
The late.
Yes, the late Chris Kasami. Andrew Mwenda organizes these meetings with the president, and they meet him, and Rugasira puts up a case for support from his country, from his government, of not more than $1 million. He needed, well, about $2 million, but even just $1 million would have done to save his business and get him sustaining the demand that was coming from the market, the supermarkets that he was supplying. And of course, you know, feet were dragged. Minister Chwanuka was reluctant to support him. Essentially, you know, how shall we react to the story if it's in the newspapers that we give a private individual $1 million? And just like that, a Ugandan entrepreneur.
I think I remember reading sections of his book, and
Yes.
he talks about the trips he made to meet the governor of the central bank,
Yes.
Tumsima Mutevile, finding him at his house,
Yes.
somewhere in Kololo, and literally begging and saying, please.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, this is a man who demonstrated utmost commitment to invest in the business. This, I mean, this
actually got a product out,
yes,
and put it on.
And this was not an Andrew Gasera product. This was a product Uganda should have been proud of. And his opportunity to break through that very thick market gets blown up in the flames. And essentially because government is not willing to support somebody like him, possibly because it doesn't come with enough political dividends on the table.
Andrew, Ivan, when you listen to the president go over this same argument again, he's made it so many times. What came into your mind?
Very brilliant speech, spot on diagnosis, very deep in prescription. But the tragedy of it all, if just like the doctors in Mulago, you have the expertise, you can diagnose the patient, you know what you need to get them treated, but you get stuck because the system cannot function. So I think we need a commission of inquiry on why the president cannot deliver on these very high-flying ideas. He has very brilliant ideas. I've just been reading his paper.
But Ivan, really, for me, it's not the president to deliver. It's not even government. This has to be driven by market.
Yeah.
Let's not have...
but
please,
Charles,
just hold on. Just hold on.
Right, Charles,
Hold
right
on. You know, the problem is...
with the exception of the US, if you watch the men who built America, who essentially did all they could as private individuals with very little government intervention, there is almost no single country in the world where private entrepreneurs have been able to establish, you know, large-scale entrepreneurial projects that, you know, at the scale of, say, General Motors or Toyota,
Look,
without government intervention.
yes,
No,
government intervention will have
actually-
to come largely by way of the enabling regulation.
Environment,
Just hold on. Let's talk about more specifics now. Let's talk about the textile industry, which has been mentioned. I think the president is saying, I've read that, has directed the prison should stop importing. This is a perfect candidate for buy Uganda, produce Uganda, because this country can produce cotton. But I can assure you, nobody will invest in a huge textile industry in this country unless they are sure that there's, first of all, a market which has been locked in. That's where government, just hold on. That's where government now needs to come and create
Hold it a moment there.
enabling legislation to encourage one to make sure that if someone produces a textile, let's say to dress school children, which used to be the norm. When we were growing up, we were dressed in shirts we are called ginger.
Yeah.
So
You know,
what happened?
that,
What went wrong?
look, that person must know that they will be able to compete fairly with the nylon
From
or polyester from China and other parts
No,
of the
but
world.
you see,
So that's where government...
That's where
But it's not
primarily
up
the
to government
contradiction
to
is.
put money
That's
and set up
exactly
a
where
textile
the
industry
contradiction
because
is.
it's not going to work.
Ugandans who grew up 2-3 decades ago were used to shirts called Yamato, produced by Yamato Kashiwada. He's
Phoenix.
now Phoenix Logistics. And then we spent $11 million trying to prop up a velupi like an anathan to produce apparels from the TriStar apparels. And I have seen correspondence dating back a few years ago when Kashiwada was struggling to get money to pump up Phoenix Logistics, and he wasn't breaking through. The president writes and says, please, this guy is struggling. We need to find a way to help him. And he can't get the help. Kananafen easily gets $11 million. And I'm wondering where the contradiction is. Because the willingness, he called it a brilliant speech, right on prescription, right on diagnosis, right on prescription. When it comes to the practicality, you find a different story. A few years ago, you had, and I want to bring this to you, Grace, when we come out of the break. You had one of the most promising Ugandan industries was an industry called Sembule Steel Mills. They produced the first product you could hold in your hands and say, this is Ugandan, called Sembule Makola Radio. I think Capital FM went and got a customized radio for 91.3 Capital FM. Sembule Makola Radio. Now it's no more. And it was functioning. Yamato is no more. It was functioning. What went wrong along the way, and especially if we are going to scrutinize this under the 30 years of President Yoweri Museveni, vis-a-vis his promises on Tuesday. After a short commercial break, we'll be right back.
Charles, you just don't want to listen to me. I'm telling you what went wrong the way is lack of market. That's the only thing.
No,
because
can
you please listen? Can you please listen? Listen to me carefully, because I'm coming from a business which has proved the concept.
And you also worked closely with the president.
I've told you the concept that I'm talking about. We have proved it, we have made it work. And I'm telling you, it can be replicated in the textile industry. The first thing you need to do is to understand how many Ugandans currently cannot afford the locally, produced clothes. Why can't they? Because it's too pricey. So if they are to afford to match the price of the second-hand clothes, you must produce something which is as cheap as second-hand clothes.
Let's come back. Let's come back to this discussion after a short break. We'll be right. Welcome back to the show, and we'll be inviting you, our viewers, to give us your views. Is industrialization just talk? Can President Yoweri Museveni walk the talk, or has he tried and failed? What has failed him? He talks about bottlenecks, including road infrastructure, access to and the cost of power, which are really fundamental. The cost of borrowing, the banks are charging incredible sums of money. I think Gracia will be telling us what has been happening to the women who have tried to access money from those banks. And what it means. A lot of people collapse under that. Sembule, I think, collapsed under the weight of loans from borrowed expensively from at commercial rates. Is it, Grace, sorry, is it lack of money, or are we putting the money in the wrong places? When you worked at the Ghana Investment Authority, one of the major things UIA has tried to do is open these industrial zones, industrial parks. Namanve, I see some large warehouses or the industries or factories coming up there. You have all these that are supposed to be opening across the country. You look at domestic enterprise. It's not that Ugandans have not tried. Ugandans have actually tried to pull these things up. Is it that they have lacked support? That we turn into a world supermarket which consumes the same products that are being produced by other countries instead of producing our own?
Okay. Of course, as we worked with investors and local producers, one of the key things that has also been a key problem is access to funding. Even if you have a great idea, you go to a bank, you want to borrow money to invest in your product, and you find that the price of funding is so extremely high. I don't know if you compare across the region, we borrow money at over 20%. You can.
It's actually between 20 to 56%.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now you tell me which businesses make profit of about 20%. Most businesses can hardly make 10%. So if you're borrowing money at 20%, basically you're working for the bank, and you're probably working to pay the interest, and you're failing to even keep money to grow to put back into your business. That is one major aspect. It is one of the things that we, as women entrepreneurs, we're actually looking at, and we're saying, okay, fine. The government has come out and saying we are giving money for women in business so that they can be able to do some, to get some easy fund through the women fund. But that amount of money that is being given is so little. It cannot do anything. It cannot help you to even invest in any simple processing plant. So unless government begins to look at a system which can allow private sector to be able to access cheaper funding, there's no way you can be able to expect the private sector to keep going to these banks that are charging very high interest rate for them to grow. Now, besides that, another aspect, another challenge that I think maybe we don't want to look at it quite objectively, the fact is that we also don't have the required skills. Everybody goes into business, but why do people go into business? Uganda has one of the highest entrepreneurship kind of like standard. I mean, we have the highest rate of starting business. We start businesses, and out of that businesses that are started, 90% of them die in the first year. Why is that? Are we not enterprising? Now, the problem is that we don't go into business because we want to do businesses that take a long time. We are actually going to survive. And it comes back to what Ekomoloit has actually said. At the end of the day, it is all about today. And I think, for me, I feel that the biggest issue is a mindset thing. Even when you're starting a business, it's a long-term journey.
Has there been leadership, would you say?
Yes.
Leadership to produce a product of Uganda made in Uganda? I
don't think it's a I don't think it's the government per se. Private sector thrives on market. If there is no market, what are you producing for? The government is not going to buy the product for you. You need to have the market. And I
want to understand from you.
Yeah.
Is it really a question of market?
Yes,
we are selling Uganda as part of a large market of 130 to 150 million within the East African community. And it's not that Ugandans are not consuming. Otherwise, China wouldn't be having a thriving market here of all grades of Chinese products, from the best to the worst.
They are very cheap.
Yes.
They are very cheap and affordable to the ordinary Ugandan. The Ugandan product, if you produce the same product that is coming from China, it cannot compete. It's high cost. So at the end of the day, if you cannot be able to produce a good that can be affordable by my mother, who lives in a village, who basically earns like what? 10,000 shillings in a month?
So what would be your prescription? What should Ugandans do?
In terms of what? In terms of
those who have the ideas, those who want to buy the products, what do? You relax and say, okay, China will produce for us, India will produce for us. Yes.
The environment can be supported. Now, if you look at China, you look at some. I was actually in Singapore about a week, 2 weeks ago, and we were studying. I'm doing a master's in communication, and we were in Singapore University. And one of the things that we were trying to understand is the Asian culture. And one of the things that we've actually recently, Google had to pull out of China because the Chinese government actually basically made it very difficult for Google to operate. Now, what they're trying to do is to protect the local equivalent of Google. And China is one of the largest markets.
Baidu, is it called Baidu or something?
Baidu, yes. Baidu is now doing what Google, and Google is actually, I'm imagining they're actually wondering why they pull out very quickly, because they pull out, they say that the government had forced them to allow to allow them to access information, and that is something that for them they cannot accept. So they moved out of China. Now, but when you look at countries like China, Singapore, Malaysia, there was a lot of support from the government in terms of really basically making investing directly into the industrialization process. So you find that in Singapore, for instance, the biggest investment fund is a government fund. It is the one that goes into investing into the big projects. It's the one that looks at the private sector organizations.
Why is that not happening here?
Well, that's a policy, a government policy that needs to be put in place.
So when you put the government policy vis-a-vis the president's address, how do the two match?
From my personal opinion, this is my personal opinion, I think there's a conflict. We have policies that conflict each other. We want to industrialize, but we also want to raise taxes. And when we want to raise taxes, we need to get this import. And this import brings in taxes. The government needs to survive. So it has to try to learn to balance these two. And this is probably where we're having challenge. How do we balance these two? How do we bring in revenue? At the same time, we also help our economy to grow, our industry to grow. So
I'm being told that we have some callers online. Let's pick some views from our viewers. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from? Keep your question or comment brief.
Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I'm called Julius.
Yes, Julius. Go ahead with your question or comment. Julius, are you still with us?
Having been in the for some time. Sorry.
Julius, you have an echo because you're listening to yourself. Turn off your TV set or turn off the volume. Yes. Let's pick another call, and Julius, you can call us back. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from. Keep your question or comment brief.
I'm Ronald calling from Seneca.
Yes, Ronald.
I want to just give my opinion on the issue. I think Napito is trying to argue about the market. But I don't want to disagree more with him, only that I want to build on that. The market for the product might not be there, but we need to ask why. So when you talk about the cost, then you'll find that the government needs to do something about it. Because, you know, a businessman thinks about making profit. If I can go to China, buy a second-hand clothes, come and in Uganda and make money, when the cost of producing this same clothes in Uganda is high, then why must I go into production when I can make the money? So I think this guy was trying to make the right decision there that, you know, the government needs to subsidize these people who are coming into the production. Without government doing that, I think Uganda is going to remain at that stage. We are actually going to be making money for other countries. So me, I really see that it is really the government, not really that the issue of the market. The market can be there when the price is reduced, and the price can only be reduced when the cost of production is low. When the cost of production is high, you can never reduce the price. So this is really what I think the government needs to work on it, market needs to tax, but also needs to look at how. Because it's trying to cry that there is no... See, people would definitely employ more people when there is real production.
Thank you.
But if there is no production, then it's difficult to employ people.
Thank you very much, Ronald, for your opinion. Do we have another caller? Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
How are you?
Fine, sir. How are you doing? Your name and where you're calling from?
I'm called from Alfred.
Fred?
Alfred.
Alfred, yes. Alfred, go ahead with your question or comment and keep it brief.
I see the problem that Ugandan industries are suffering from is the lack of standards.
You have an echo. Could you turn off the volume of your TV set, please?
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
The problem that we have in Uganda is lack of standards. The Ugandan government has failed to enforce standards in whatever we produce as a country. So because of that, even us Ugandans will fear to buy our own products. Recently, I was enjoying sausages made from Uganda, but I was shocked when I heard that these sausages were being made from a certain stream. That is very unfortunate. So if the Ugandan government could enforce standards and then make sure the taxes are low, and then make sure that the Ugandan products are marketed, both inside and outside Uganda.
Ronald, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
There's been a lot of complaints about some of these imported products. That you buy a shoe, you wear it once, and then the next day it gives way. Meaning that even the standard of what we are consuming as imported products is actually not up to scratch.
Yes.
Yes.
So what those people do is that they produce two products. They produce two for Ugandan market, which can allow anything without standards, and then they produce the other product that goes to a standard market.
So the question is
Yes.
protection.
Protection.
Thank you.
And then lower taxes.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfred, for your comment. Do you have another call online? Yes, go ahead. Your name, sir? Your name?
Hello. This is Mbarak Mustafa.
This is Christopher, yes?
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I was saying the major problem in Uganda, we actually don't have great products. If you look at China, as they manufacture these foods, they consider all sorts of like the poor, the rich. But in Uganda here, foods are just manufactured without considering the level of the people.
Okay.
That's why the consumption is only by the rich, and this has actually caused the collapse in industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher. I think we need to bring the discussion back to studio.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the first caller, I just didn't get the name well, got it spot on. I think what government needs to drive first and foremost is what we in business call affordability strategy. Look, the bulk of Ugandans are not consuming produced products. That's why they resort to maybe second-hand version of these products. So you need
There's no
affordability.
second-hand beer. and Ugandans are consuming beer everywhere across the country.
I mean other products. you need for people to be able to afford, and that's where government can really have a role. It doesn't have to stop imported products, and the moment you drive affordability in this country, the market will be immense.
How do you drive affordability?
So how do you drive? You drive affordability basically by making sure that the people who are producing are able to enjoy lower costs in the various costs of the raw material they use, the utilities and the taxes. You don't have to abolish all the taxes or to give them free, but you'll have to sit down with the guys who produce to make sure that it's a win-win between them and government. And then you need to link, any industry must be linked to agriculture, because that will make the market sustainable over a long time, because once farmers have money from selling their product to an industry, they will then be able to afford the finished product. The two must be connected, because you cannot sustainably produce finished products if the people cannot afford them. They cannot afford them if they are not getting income. So you need that direct backward and forward linkages.
Is that happening in government policy?
I'm sure that thinking is
having
there.
the budget speech presented on Thursday, the 8th, and you'll hear all these nice things. And I want to go back. I had a similar discussion, debate with Andrew and other people on the hot seat on Friday. And we're having an argument. And I was thinking, if you had not disrupted the cooperative movement, take, for example, Banyankore Kweterana, which had reached that takeoff stage. It is mobilizing farmers, they're producing products. Yes, they're selling them at that time as raw materials. That's about 30 years ago. Now it has folded and every farmer is on his own. You had a large cooperative movement that was at that stage. I'm asking the question, Grace and Ivan, you could help. What went wrong? Because you can't ignore the fact that, yes, Sembule might have lacked the fundamentals, but they were in the market, they had survived, they were producing something and putting it on the table. If you want to push for industrialization, you promote that and say, this is where you have reached. It's not very good quality, it's lacking ABCD. This is what you need to do to fix those fundamentals. And so I'm asking, I'm failing to get the crux of why it can't be done. Yet, a few years ago, you could see it was being done. You could take another example, the construction industry. If you're going to promote local enterprise, you needed to have the Mukalazis by now should have grown into serious construction companies. the Zimwes would have grown into serious construction companies. But now move across the country. Most of the people doing the small and the big jobs are foreign. So the president talks about donating jobs for Ugandan children to Chinese, to Japanese, to Germans, to French, to other people. And exactly the same thing is happening out there.
Interestingly, there's a gentleman in Luzera prison called Dr. Kiza Besigye, and throughout his campaign, these the issues was raising. That, one, we need a government that not only trusts and has confidence in the Ugandan people, but goes ahead to give them a conducive atmosphere to do business and compete favorably, but also protects them from the vagaries of foreign capitalists. Because what the Chinese do, you even have Chinese in this country who will go and buy cement from Hima and supply Sinohydro. In Rwanda, if you have a contract, the contract clearly stipulates how much local content.
Yeah. The Ugandan policy, I think the Ugandan, the PPD Act requires that for all these construction major projects, 15% must be local content.
Yeah, but that's largely on paper. Our very good policies and legal instruments are largely paper tigers. Look at the tax holidays, for example. You have a very good policy that if you have a company that is using 40% Ugandan raw materials and exporting, then that company should be able to get a tax holiday of not less than 10 years. But in real life, what happens is the guys that get the 10-year tax holidays are essentially those who, in the worldview of the people managing the affairs of the country, bring political dividends on the table. Possibly they've given a kickback. One of the issues the president raises in his address, corruption. So it's a clogged system. You mean well, the spirit is there, but you just can't get it right.
Okay. Grace, I used to track reports of the Ghana Investment Authority and the definition of an investor in this country. You are, what did I used to call her? Mama Cheers, Adieri. Yeah. The lady who produces Bella wine. Those are some of the people that, Uganda women entrepreneurs that you have. You do not find them on the investors' table being talked about as investors. Is that an environment that can produce local manufacturers?
Well, I guess that we can't say that they don't sit. I know Adieri sits on quite a number of government roundtable, the presidential roundtable, she sits on them, which is basically for businesses and investors. But that is just a very small representation of the majority of the women in businesses. The majority of the women in businesses cannot even be, cannot reach that class where she's there. But I first, before I go there, I wanted to just clarify that actually with the tax holiday is no longer there. What the government has put is basically to standardize. It's all about capital allowances. So how much investment you put in capital, that is what you get as a rebate for your holiday. So you're allowed to draw out on your capital investment. So it depends on how much money you're putting in your capital investment, and that's open for anybody. It's not only for foreign; it's also for local businesses. Sometimes we think that the investors have got to come from outside, but even Ugandans can be investors. Now, when it comes to women in business getting on the table, this is something that, as you will, we actually feel that women's voice in business need to be basically heard a little bit much more. We are not represented. In Kenya, for instance, the public procurement policy in Kenya actually provides for the local content, 30% must be women.
And they see through that.
Youth. Yes, and the key issue, you're right, enforcement. We have these policies in papers. Can we make it work? How do we make it work? This year, for instance, we put our theme this year is doing business with government. And we're saying women, we need to start doing business with government. We need to basically get...
Is there someone in government who's saying we must do business with these women? Because I think that's...
At the moment, not.
You can knock on all doors you want to knock on. If there is nobody on the other side saying this is where we need to be doing business with. What President Museveni said in 1996, he said, why buy furniture from abroad when you can buy it from Katwe? Where that stopped, I have no idea.
There are two things here. One, you know, it's a two-way thing. We can blame the government. We can also blame ourselves. In the PPDA Act, it actually provides for what they call the preferential schemes. The preferential scheme actually does provide for giving preference to local, to national companies and businesses. How many people claim that? How many people even know that? Now, on the other side of the private sector, another thing that we cannot keep blaming government is that the fact that we don't try to know what our rights are. Their provision, how many people have demanded those provisions?
You know, I would imagine that if that actually did exist, rather than go to give a State of the Nation address and start lamenting and say we are on take-off stage, where we have been for the last I don't know how many years, you would rather say, in my government, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities that you people out there are not taking. I think I would understand that language. Whoever is the president's speechwriter would say, look, we have a provision in the law that provides, if you're a businessman out there and you're watching me deliver this State of the Nation address to the Ghanaian Parliament, these are the opportunities that you're not taking advantage of. We have about 1 minute to end.
Very interesting, Charles, because immediately after giving the State of the Nation address, the president traveled to Germany and met investors. And he did just right what you've done. Outlined for them investment opportunities in the country. He traveled with a very powerful delegation. And he cannot do that in Uganda, essentially because I honestly think Mr. Museveni has very little confidence in Ugandans. His language, my investors, in his worldview are Indians, Chinese, the Europeans, because he says the ones who have the money, don't touch them. So when they come here, they can afford to have free land. They can afford to float every procedure there is. They can afford to exploit Ugandans. They can afford to get away with capital flight. They can afford to do just so much, you know, violate the provisions of local content that we're talking about, essentially because, I mean, it's a paradise. Uganda is not just a supermarket, but a paradise for any investor.
Let's turn this over to Honor to close. The president's man on the show, if I should borrow that. But
well, so I would say the president was not lamenting. It was a call to action.
No, I looked for the call to action and I didn't see it in his actions. Because
he did it in German, not in Uganda.
Let me ask, Honor. You are moving around, shuttling around the world, inviting investors, the cherished investor. And no one is looking local and saying, this is what we need to do for these people. It can't be a question of the market when Ugandans are consuming. They might be consuming little, but they are consuming.
Look, of course, for me, I don't share your obsession with the local investors. I just believe what Uganda needs is somebody who can turn the immense local raw materials, especially agricultural products, into finished goods that are affordable first by Ugandans. So whether it's a German who will do that, a Chinese, I have no quarrel. So the challenge I will maintain is that government needs to tell a German that
and when they pack the money and take it away?
We have this number of Ugandans who would be able to afford textile. And we want you to discuss with us how will they be able to afford to have bed sheets, 2 pairs, each of them, whatever. And that's where the discussion should begin. How do we make bed sheets which are affordable by an average Ugandan who is currently sleeping, sharing a gomesi with his wife in the night? That's where the debate should be. Then if you establish the quantity of clothes that is required, what then does government offer for someone to put in his money to produce that clothes and be able to compete?
Let me just ask you one question before we get out of here. Which country in the world has developed and transformed and developed rather, apart from Germany, which was only being reconstructed after the Second World War, using foreigners?
No, I'm not saying it must use foreigners, but I'm saying it must use people who have ability to do it. There's also one thing to say it must be Ugandans when they cannot do it.
No, we're not saying it must be. We're simply saying, are we supporting Ugandans enough to compete favorably?
Yeah, I agree with you that we are not supporting them, but you know, support must be based on facts. We haven't established the facts.
No, the facts are there.
Look, because
it is the fact that we
you
have
talked of somebody who wanted to do
1.6 million houses in this country. Yeah. But when we seek investment in that area, we fly to Germany, we fly to France. We do not give a damn if the 10,000 Ugandans who might be eyeing that sector
or
as
trying to do something in
yeah,
that sector.
absolutely. The likes of Andrew Rugasira can go and hang for all we care,
unfortunately, our time
as
is
long
out.
as we have our investors.
And one of the major questions we'll be discussing maybe in future, maybe after the presentation of the budget, is the question of Ugandans actually are sleeping in cottage industries. The houses that Ugandans are building for themselves, sleep in, are enough capital to build a small industry. The malls that we have gotten obsessed with, the plazas, the malls, are all industries, and they would employ some people. Why are Ugandans choosing to put their money there instead of putting it into something that, one, will be sustainable over a long period of time, but also provide some employment? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Grace Achiro Labong.
Yes.
Thank you very much for making time for the show. Thank you very much, Ivan Okuda. Thank you very much, Honor Peter Komole. Thank you very much to you all our viewers for joining us. And Ivan was talking about Kiza Besigye. So, some thugs decided to break into his house in Rwakabengo in Rukunjiri, broke the glass door and I think tampered with the electricity system. Whatever it is they were looking for, maybe we'll know, maybe not. Have a good night.